this is from Monday, but I felt it was worth highlighting this exchange as Israel escalates and bombs multiple countries in the region and is launching a ground invasion of Lebanon, a sovereign nation that should have territorial integrity, should have its sovereignty respected, in the same way that the Biden administration and this same very State Department preaches about Ukraine. But that's not what we're going to hear now from this bloodless ghoul, Matthew Miller. This is Zateos Prem Thacker, formerly of The Intercept, asking the State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, about Israel's offensive in Lebanon and the pattern that is emerging in terms of their usage of this bombing campaign and its connection to Israel's genocidal actions in Rafah.
Prem, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. What we're seeing in Lebanon, we saw a similar pattern with regards to Rafah. First, the U.S. saying that they wouldn't want to see Israel conducting major operations. Then Israel going ahead with what they called limited operations, and then this continued tolerance of sort of day-to-day attacks.
Can you pause just for a quick sec? I want to point out that Israel always says that they're doing limited operations, almost always, in their history, until it's limited, until it's not limited. And we have reporting from Politico that Brett McGurk, who is the Middle East advisor to the White House, is basically overrode the CIA, the Pentagon, and even the State Department, and just basically signaling to Israel, don't worry, you can go into Lebanon in this limited fashion, but you just got to keep it kind of quiet. And it reportedly enraged members of like the Pentagon and the CIA, because they understand what this could mean in terms of sparking broader regional conflict as it relates to Iran, which is what we're seeing right now. The political Zionism of the administration is putting the other agencies that should be across this intelligence in precarious situations. Keep going.
And then this continued tolerance of sort of day-to-day attacks. That has led to over 44% of all buildings in Rafah being either destroyed or damaged, according to satellite photos, which is to say that there might not have been a major operation in Rafah, but there was cumulative attacks that led to a good deal of destruction. So how does this precedent of Rafah portend for Lebanon?
So every conflict is different, but if you look at what we continue to engage with Israel about when it comes to Lebanon, is ensuring that they have the ability to attack terrorist targets, terrorist infrastructure, a terrorist organization, but ultimately we want to see a diplomatic resolution.
Well, was that the case with Rafah, for instance, not just in Rafah, but
we've never wanted to see a diplomatic resolution with Hamas.
Well, okay. Well, what about the ceasefire?
We wanted to see a ceasefire, but we have always been committed to the destruction of Hamas.
What's the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah to him?
But that's what's being pointed out there. Right. Because the reality is what the Biden administration has basically said is that Israel can do whatever it wants in Gaza as long as it doesn't spark a regional war. But even then, Israel can do whatever it wants. Like the reality is that the administration has been complicit in the genocide of the people in Gaza the entire time, because these ceasefire negotiations, when you say, I want to play that part again, because he basically admits that the ceasefire negotiations were not earnest, and the fact that they never saw a diplomatic solution with Hamas. Then what was all of the year-long insistence that they were pursuing a ceasefire? How does that square with that statement? You never wanted a diplomatic solution with Hamas. That's what ceasefire negotiations are. That's about diplomacy.
Well, and this was always, we were able to read in between the lines when they changed ceasefire to temporary ceasefire.
Yep.
Because what that meant is, okay, fine, we'll like feed people for a little bit or whatever. And then we will return to what Israel and America see as the solution in the region, which is force. Not diplomacy.
Yes, and eliminating Hamas, which is a goal that no one agrees in military strategy no one with any credibility outside of the political Zionists in Israel and in the administration
And so
thinks is a reasonable goal. Hamas is still operating in Gaza. And by the way, when they say they want to eliminate Hamas, they know that they can't do it. What they mean is they want to slaughter as many Palestinians under the pretext of eliminating Hamas.
Yeah.
Because even if you say you killed every Hamas fighter, which they haven't, and they can't.
they'd make more.
Just Hamas by another name is going to crop up.
Yeah.
Because resistance to Israel will just take another form, because the kids that are just seeing their mom or their sister or their grandparent bombed into smithereens, they're going to form another resistance organization. So this is impossible. Eliminating Hamas, eliminating resistance to Israel just means killing everybody.
But
so let's go ahead.
I just want to say, like, what he says about Hamas here, and he's saying we want diplomacy with Lebanon, so that doesn't mean Hezbollah. So again, like this diplomacy is just a word that is meant for PR consumption.
Yeah.
Infrastructure, a terrorist organization, but ultimately we want to see a diplomatic resolution.
Well, was that the case with Rafah, for instance? Not just in Rafah, but
We've never wanted to see a diplomatic resolution with Hamas.
Well, okay. Well, what about the ceasefire?
We wanted to see a ceasefire, but we have always been committed. We have always been committed to the destruction of Hamas. We did want to see a ceasefire, but we have always made clear that we wanted to see a different authority moving forward in governance of Gaza.
Okay, but so for instance, other UN satellite image shows that 66% of Gaza structures have been damaged. And you earlier today said that the U.S. supports the targeting of terrorist infrastructure, not civilian infrastructure. Does the U.S. believe 66% of Gaza's buildings are terrorist infrastructure?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Which is why we have been engaged to try to reach a ceasefire to end that conflict, which is why we have been pushing for a ceasefire to months. And I wish that Hamas would come to the table and work with us on a ceasefire. As you saw, as
Wait.
you were saying
All
earlier,
right.
Hamas is...
I wish Hamas would come to the table after we said we're not seeking a diplomatic solution from them and that we do not want them to be the governing authority of Gaza.
But we've never expected them to.
But Hamas coming to the table is they come to the table, samurai swords are on the table, and then they impale themselves and fall on them in front of everybody. That's the negotiations that the administration is reportedly interested in. That asking Hamas to eliminate itself as a governing structure before you would reach a ceasefire is not negotiations. That's just buying more time for more slaughter.
Conquest. Shout out to all the people who went to this guy's house and protested him. That is good to do.
All right, keep going.
would come to the table and work with us on a ceasefire. As you heard me saying earlier, Hamas has been absent for weeks. Won't even respond to the mediators putting forward.
They literally assassinated Hania, the lead negotiator and most open to this in Iran.
But Hamas won't come to the table after we kill their top negotiator. What is wrong with Hamas?
And we have to be clear. He knows he's lying. This is as malicious as it looks. This is not some sort of difference opinion. This is conquest that we are witnessing now.
Yeah.
Hamas would come to the table and work with us on a ceasefire. As you heard me saying earlier, Hamas has been absent for weeks. Won't even respond to the mediators putting forward ideas asking whether they would agree to a ceasefire or not. Look, you can talk about Israel and the culpability that Israel has and the tough decisions that Israel needs to make. And it's absolutely true that Israel needs to make tough decisions to get to a ceasefire. But the way out of this conflict is a ceasefire. And it is Hamas that's missing in action right now that won't come to the table to talk about one.
You know, it's easy for one of their top negotiators to be missing in action because they're in 6 feet under the ground in a grave.
They get blown up because Israel doesn't want people to show up to the table, and they will kill them before they get there because it's a murderous nation supported by another murderous nation, the America government.
I mean, he contradicted him. I mean, that is the most instructive clip that we could have played in terms of like the supposed sincerity of these negotiations. You just see that right there.
And I'll just say, I hope it ends like Vietnam, which is the people that we had been waiting on as our partners. We give up on them and leave them to sink or swim.
Dango Bangle says, what you just described is called seppuku, and regarding samurai swords, the most used weapon would be either a tanto or wakizashi. I was about to say seppuku, but I didn't want to like get it wrong and
say the wrong
one. Be culturally insensitive.
There's some other words in that. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah. Franklin Delano Disco, if you are in negotiations with someone and your terms where the other party needs to destroy itself, you are an unserious person. Right.
Yep.
Stupid says, ceasefire without diplomacy is destruction. Snarkanorsky, I can't imagine the level of soulless evil at the State Department of Matthew Miller is similar to even 25% of them. I mean, I mentioned there the Brett McGurk leading these negotiations is also the presidential advisor to Biden, reportedly, Amos Hochstein, who is a former IDF soldier. He's literally a dual citizen of Israel and the United States.
Yeah, and I'm actually not sensitive to that sort of stuff. I think like the idea that JFK got asked about the Vatican when he was running for president never really offended me, and I think Zionists that hold citizenship like that, it is a problem for me. It's a problem. It's a fucking problem, and it's presenting itself.
All right, guys, no more time for calls. We'll read some IMs and get out of here. Sorry. Snarknorsky, forget seppuku. We Nordics commit suicide via decades of ennui and self-loathing.
The McGurk thing, I gotta say, we used to have a deep state that had a bit of pride.
I know.
I mean, the Joint Chiefs of Staff spied on Nixon, maybe. CIA helped get him Watergated.
I mean, the problem is
something?
The CIA values Israel as an intelligence outpost and as an aircraft carrier in the Middle East, but they don't want Israel to do what it's designed to do, which is expand its borders and provoke Iran, because they're worried about that destabilizing their efforts and what they're trying to do from like a cold-hearted empire maintenance perspective. But yeah, the problem is like these are the Zionism is not rational. Is Matthew Miller related to Stephen Miller? Snarkanorsky, doubt it. Snarkanorsky also says, as Atreus says, the State Department is where you go if you want to be a legal, respectable serial killer. Look, there's a lot of people like Anel Sheline was in. Oh, Shailene. I'm sorry. Sheline. Yeah, I think I got it right the first time. Was in the State Department. She talks about like there's a lot of people that want to do good and work on humanitarian things. So I don't want to paint with a really broad brush, but the people that rise to the top in that situation are.
Matt Dusses did a podcast with a few of those folks. I think Sheilane was one of them, and a few other people, including I think a Palestinian who is there, and not a recipe for advancement. Criticizing America's policy in Israel. And that's the horrible thing that's happening through all this, is that bureaucracy is being pruned of people who aren't pro-genocide. Yeah. And that's going to have lasting consequences. The other Russer, listening to GOP Cokie Roberts blather on like that is the most amazing waste of time, other than the fact that it continues to paint him as a completely limp idiot.
And just to flag to that point of the people who rise the ranks in the State Department, especially the comms team. So it features luminaries, as we saw, of Matthew Miller, Vedant Patel, John Kirby, who's now the National Security Council spokesperson, and one Jen Psaki, who used to be the State Department communications director before she became White House press secretary, and now has a cushy gig on MSNBC.
Chibata says, sorry, Emma, your speaking time is up. Thank you.
Emma, your time is up.
Thank you.
Future reactionary Mujahideen became Al-Qaeda, became ISIS-K, and so on and so on. Exactly.
Remember the PLO?
Yep. But that's also why Netanyahu fostered Hamas in Gaza and let money get funneled to them, and was pretty happy with them being the political party that won in the elections that they allowed them to hold like 18, 19 years ago. It's because it's a valuable foil.
I mean, domestic fundamentalist movements were exploited by the CIA during COINTELPRO to, say, upset the Black Panthers and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, Israel, when we talk about Israel's as a sovereign nation, repeating it over and over again, it's just really not. Again,
No, it's a relic of a weird time.
Benjamin Netanyahu was lived part of his life in and around the Philly suburbs. He's best understood as a Bush era neocon. He's secular.
I mean, so were a lot of the founders of that.
Right. Like, it's not like he's not Smotrich and Ben-Gvir in terms of like what their feelings are about what they want for Israel, like in their motivation, their messianic vision. But fundamentally, it doesn't really matter. And that's why when people boil this down to religion, it's just so ridiculous.
You're right.
Because like there are those fundamentalists that are a part of his governing coalition, but absent those fundamentalists, he's still a genocidal maniac. So it's about power and supremacy.
It was labor Zionists, not fundamentalist Zionists, who founded Israel, by and large. And the religious element of it became a useful tool, go figure, after that fact.
Dango Bangle, sorry for messing up the name. Oh, no, it's fine. Dango Bangle, Netanyahu didn't just let money get funneled to Hamas. He directly funded them, too.
I mean, I think plenty of questions should still need to be asked about the approval of a concert right next to a concentration camp, and that sort of thing, and how over concerns it was approved, and also apparently like people weren't prepared to protect it. I think all of those things are actual questions, and some people might find those conspiratorial. I think Bibi Netanyahu and all those folks are conspiratorial type of people.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.